Good evening, everyone. We come to you tonight with a pivotal update, one that stands at the intersection of hope and skepticism. A moment that could change the course of history or perhaps remind us of just how fragile peace can be in the Middle East. Today, the United States' top diplomat stood before the world's media in Israel, addressing the ongoing conflict in Gaza, delivering what could be considered a glimmer of optimism, but with a powerful underlying question: where is lasting peace? The statement from the US diplomat was a mixture of cautious optimism and veiled concern. Words of progress, of moving forward, were echoed to the press, but as the diplomat emphasized, it's one thing to make progress and another entirely to ensure that peace endures. Progress is being made. Those were the words used to convey the incremental steps that have been taken toward a ceasefire and the opening of pathways for humanitarian aid. But we all know too well that progress in the Middle East is a term with layers of complexity, a term that holds meaning only as long as it doesn't unravel in the face of deep-rooted tensions and unresolved grievances. So, while one diplomat's words may offer a faint ray of hope, they raise an undeniable question: where is the peace that has eluded us for so long? As world leaders and international organizations scramble to broker a resolution, it's easy to lose sight of the human toll behind the headlines. The images of children caught in crossfire, of homes reduced to rubble, of families torn apart. Gaza is not just a geographical location. It's a symbol, a cry for justice that has echoed through the halls of power for decades. And yet, despite repeated promises of peace, it remains in turmoil. The casualties of war continue to mount. The displacement of civilians grows by the day, and those who dare to hope for a future beyond the bloodshed are left asking, when will it end? The US diplomat's words today were meant to reassure, to show that despite the barriers, there is movement toward a solution, however small. But let's be clear. Progress in the Middle East does not always translate to lasting peace. The diplomat acknowledged that the road ahead is fraught with challenges that cannot be solved with mere words. These words, despite their hopeful tone, are a reminder that the underlying issues, some of them decades old, are far from being resolved. When peace has been promised time and time again, only to slip through the fingers of those who seek it, the question becomes harder to ignore: where is lasting peace? The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has spanned over generations, fueled by a complex web of politics, religion, identity, and history. Peace, for both sides, has often seemed like a distant dream. While we hear talks of progress, we cannot ignore the reality on the ground. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza continues to worsen. Hundreds of thousands have been displaced. Infrastructure is decimated, and families face a constant struggle for survival in the face of both military action and deprivation. In times like these, what does progress even mean? Is it just the cessation of violence, the opening of aid corridors, or is it something far more profound, a transformation of the very structures that perpetuate this suffering? Israel, of course, has its own set of concerns, fears, and security considerations. For them, the peace process often feels like an existential struggle, one where any compromise might feel like surrender. With the ever-present threat of militant attacks, of rocket fire, of terrorist operations, the idea of peace becomes inseparable from security. For the Israeli government, any meaningful peace deal must address these security concerns. But the price for peace has always been high. Can any agreement truly address the deep-rooted security concerns while also respecting the sovereignty and rights of the Palestinian people? On the other hand, the Palestinians face an equally complex reality. Their journey has been one of exile, loss, and struggle for self-determination. The peace process, from their perspective, has too often been one of broken promises. The occupation, the blockade, the constant sense of being disenfranchised, all of these factors have shaped their aspirations for a future free of violence and oppression. For Palestinians, lasting peace is not just the absence of conflict, it is the recognition of their rights, the restoration of their dignity, and the end of an occupation that has lasted for over half a century. And yet, despite these conflicting needs, there remains an undeniable human element. The people of Gaza, of Israel, and of the broader region have seen their lives upended time and time again. For them, peace isn't an abstract concept discussed in international forums. It's a need for a future where they can live without fear, where they can build a future for their children. and where they can see an end to the cycles of violence and retaliation that have defined their existence for too long. As the diplomat's words lingered in the air, they were met with a mixture of hope and skepticism. Yes, progress is being made, but how much longer must the people of Gaza wait for the peace they deserve? How many more ceasefires, how many more rounds of negotiations before peace becomes more than just a fleeting idea? History has shown us that peace in the Middle East is never easy. It is fraught with challenges, steeped in history, and shaped by forces that are often beyond the control of any one government or diplomat. As we stand at this crossroads, the world watches. The eyes of millions are fixed on the promises being made today, and the question on everyone's mind is cleared: where is the peace that has been promised? Tonight, we dive deeper into this critical moment in history, reflecting on the path forward, the promises of progress, and the harsh realities that still stand in the way of lasting peace. As the world continues to grapple with this conflict, one thing is certain: the need for peace in Gaza has never been more urgent, and the pursuit of that peace must not be forgotten. As the US diplomat's words reverberate through the media, it's essential to examine the current state of the peace talks and what is meant by this progress that is being claimed. The truth is, the situation in Gaza is not simple, and the path toward lasting peace is anything but straightforward. Progress, while a welcome sign, can mean different things depending on the perspective from which it is viewed. The diplomat's remarks reflect what many would consider incremental steps, small victories within a broader, deeply entrenched conflict. There have been talks, conversations, and some agreements between Israel, Palestine, and international stakeholders. These steps, often taking the form of ceasefires and humanitarian agreements, are vital in a situation that has seen too much bloodshed and too many lives lost. But when we speak of progress, we need to ask, what does that really look like on the ground? Is it just the ability to momentarily pause the violence, or is it the beginning of a sustainable and permanent resolution? In recent weeks, there have been reports of temporary ceasefires that allowed much needed aid to enter Gaza and provided civilians a brief respite from the constant airstrikes and ground operations. These short breaks are crucial for saving lives, but they can also be fragile. The challenge here is the nature of these agreements, often temporary, often fragile. When the ceasefire ends, the real test begins. Will both sides honour the agreement, or will hostilities resume, as they have done countless times before, leaving the people of Gaza trapped in an endless cycle of violence and fear? Humanitarian corridors have been opened intermittently, allowing for the delivery of supplies, medicines, food, and water to the population of Gaza. These moments of respite have been critical in alleviating the immediate suffering. But again, we must ask ourselves, is this progress enough? Opening a corridor to allow aid into a war-torn region doesn't solve the underlying issues. The blockade of Gaza remains a central issue, one that impacts the everyday lives of millions of Palestinians. Until the fundamental question of Gaza's economic and social future is addressed, aid deliveries, no matter how vital, will only serve as a temporary patch. Furthermore, there is the matter of diplomatic engagement. For the first time in years, high-level discussions between Israeli officials, Palestinian representatives, and global diplomats have become more frequent, and there seems to be some level of mutual recognition. The US has long been a central player in this dynamic, but its role has evolved. Today, as international support for a two-state solution wavers and regional powers such as Egypt, Jordan, and Qatar become increasingly involved, the focus has shifted. The peace talks now involve a broader coalition of nations, all pushing for an agreement that can endure. The idea of a two-state solution remains a cornerstone of the discussions. For years, it has been seen as the most viable option for resolving the conflict, a solution that would see both Israel and Palestine coexisting peacefully within recognized borders. However, as time passes, the feasibility of this solution grows more uncertain. Israel's settlements in the West Bank, Palestinian divisions between the West Bank and Gaza, and the rise of militant groups like Hamas complicate matters significantly. The idea of creating a viable, independent Palestinian state alongside Israel seems more elusive than ever. Despite these challenges, however, the diplomat's words of progress may still ring true in some respects. On the surface, the fact that talks are continuing, that ceasefires are being agreed upon and that humanitarian aid is reaching those in need can be seen as a sign of movement. It's a sign that, despite the deep divisions, there is still hope for dialogue. These are not small steps, and they shouldn't be dismissed as mere formalities. In a conflict that has endured for decades, even small signs of movement can be significant, but the reality is that the most difficult work still lies ahead. Progress cannot be measured in ceasefires and aid alone. The real challenge is addressing the root causes of the conflict, the occupation, the security fears, the human rights abuses, and the deep-seated animosities that have formed over decades. Without meaningful discussions that tackle these issues head-on, any progress made will always be fragile, always at risk of falling apart. One of the most significant barriers to a lasting peace is the lack of trust between the two sides. Palestinians have lived under occupation for decades, and for many, the dream of a Palestinian state feels increasingly out of reach. For Israelis, the memory of terror attacks, rocket fire, and the constant threat of violence is a reality they must confront daily. The distrust between the two peoples is perhaps the greatest obstacle to achieving peace, and it cannot be overcome by diplomacy alone. It will take years of sustained effort, reconciliation, and perhaps most importantly, a willingness to compromise on both sides. Yet, there is hope. Despite the immense challenges, despite the long history of broken promises, there are individuals on both sides working tirelessly for peace. The US. Diplomat's visit is a reflection of that commitment, a reminder that there are people who still believe in the possibility of a better future. It's a difficult road, and one that will require tremendous political will, but it is not impossible. The progress made so far should not be underestimated. Ceasefires, humanitarian aid, and diplomatic dialogue are the building blocks of peace. They offer a glimpse into what might be possible if all parties are willing to make the necessary sacrifices. But we must be clear-eyed about the situation. Progress does not equal peace. It's a step in the right direction, but the road ahead remains long. And the ultimate question, where is lasting peace, remains one that still needs to be answered. As we continue to delve into the complexities of the peace process, it becomes abundantly clear that the obstacles to lasting peace in Gaza are not only political but deeply human. The roadblocks, both tangible and intangible, are deeply ingrained in the history and psyche of the people involved. The US diplomat's statement, while offering hope, does little to change the fact that the real challenges to peace are not easily overcome. For every positive development, there are setbacks that threaten to undo the progress made. At the heart of the conflict lies the deep-seated mistrust between Israel and Palestine. This mistrust is not something that can be negotiated away in a single round of talks or with a few ceasefires. It has been built over decades, layered with a history of violence, loss, and broken promises. Each side views the other through a lens shaped by trauma and fear, and this makes genuine dialogue difficult. For Israel, the memory of past terrorist attacks, suicide bombings, and rockets fired from Gaza is ever present. The fear of security breaches runs deep, and any agreement is often met with skepticism. For Palestinians, the sense of injustice is just as profound. Decades of occupation, displacement, and economic hardship have left them feeling oppressed, marginalized, and ignored by the international community. These feelings are not abstract concepts, they are lived experiences. They are felt in every street, in every home, and in the daily lives of the people who have been caught in this conflict for far too long. Peace cannot be brokered by diplomats alone. It requires a fundamental shift in the hearts and minds of those who have borne the brunt of this violence. Until this shift occurs, the barriers to peace will remain formidable. The issue of security is, of course, central to any potential peace deal. Israel's security concerns are legitimate. The country has faced attacks from Gaza in various forms over the years, and the spectre of violence looms large over every peace negotiation. For Israel, peace cannot be achieved without a guarantee of safety and security, something that has been elusive for years. However, the quest for security cannot come at the expense of Palestinian rights and dignity. The question of how to address security without further entrenching the suffering of Palestinians is one of the most difficult challenges in the peace process. On the other hand, for Palestinians, the absence of a state of their own, the constant checkpoints, the closures, the demolitions of homes, and the restrictions on their movement are daily reminders of their lack of freedom. They have been promised peace, but for many, peace remains a distant dream, something that is discussed in international forums but rarely seen in their lives. The Gaza blockade continues to stifle the economy, prevent the movement of goods and people, and perpetuate a cycle of poverty and despair. Until this situation is addressed, no amount of ceasefire agreements or temporary humanitarian aid will be enough to bring about lasting peace. Another major roadblock is the divided leadership within Palestine itself. The split between Hamas in Gaza and the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank is a significant challenge to any peace efforts. The two factions have different ideologies, different goals, and often work at cross purposes. This division weakens the Palestinian position as there is no unified front with which Israel can negotiate. Furthermore, it gives Israel an excuse to dismiss any talks as futile, claiming that there is no one to negotiate with. Until the internal divisions within Palestinian leadership are resolved, the peace process will remain fractured. The involvement of external actors further complicates the situation. Regional powers such as Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt have their own interests in the conflict and have historically influenced the dynamics of the peace process. While some have acted as mediators, others have used the conflict as a proxy for broader geopolitical struggles. The involvement of these countries can either facilitate peace or, in some cases, exacerbate the situation. The involvement of international powers like the US and Russia too has often been marked by inconsistencies and shifting priorities, further complicating the path to peace. The international community as a whole has a significant role to play, but it is not enough to simply call for peace and hope that it will happen. Diplomacy is essential, but it must be backed by concrete actions. The US has long been a major player in this conflict, but its role has been questioned in recent years. Some Palestinians view the US as biased toward Israel, while others see it as a necessary mediator. The challenge for the US and other international actors is to demonstrate that they can be neutral brokers of peace. No easy task given the entrenched alliances and interests at play. In many ways, the US Diplomat's visit was a reminder that while progress is being made in certain areas, much more needs to be done, and the international community must do more than simply show up at the negotiating table. One of the most heartbreaking aspects of the conflict is the toll it takes on civilians, especially children. The devastation in Gaza, both physically and emotionally, is almost incomprehensible. Families are torn apart, homes destroyed, lives shattered. The question of how to address the humanitarian crisis is urgent, but humanitarian aid alone will not solve the problem. The root causes of the conflict must be addressed if there is to be any hope of ending the cycle of violence. Economic development, infrastructure rebuilding, and access to basic services like education and healthcare are crucial in providing a foundation for peace. However, these efforts must go hand in hand with a political solution that addresses the core issues. The international community must recognize that peace in Gaza is not just about stopping the fighting. It's about addressing the underlying grievances that have fueled the conflict for generations. It's about recognizing the rights of the Palestinian people, ensuring the security of Israel, and finding a way for both peoples to coexist in a way that respects their dignity, their aspirations, and their humanity. This is not an easy task, and there is no quick fix. But until these core issues are addressed, lasting peace will remain elusive. The diplomat's message of progress is important, but it must be tempered with the understanding that the road to peace is fraught with challenges. The roadblocks are many, and they are not easily removed. But as long as there are those working tirelessly to break down these barriers, there is still hope. Peace may seem out of reach today, but the pursuit of it must continue, with the recognition that lasting peace requires more than just diplomatic talks. It requires a transformation of the very conditions that have fueled the conflict for so long. The questions that surround the pursuit of lasting peace in Gaza cannot simply be answered through diplomatic negotiations, ceasefire agreements, or humanitarian aid. These are crucial components, but they alone cannot bring about a sustainable peace. The world has watched time and again as peace efforts have been derailed by violence, mistrust, and political agendas. The true challenge lies not in the immediate, but in the long term, in building a foundation of peace that extends beyond temporary agreements and fragile truces. What is needed is a transformative shift in the way we approach the peace process, one that transcends political negotiations and addresses the human realities that lie at the heart of the conflict. For peace to be lasting, it must begin with the acknowledgement of the fundamental rights of all individuals involved. It is not enough to simply broker deals between governments or political leaders. It is essential to ensure that the voices of the people, those who have borne the brunt of the violence, are heard. The people of Gaza and Israel alike have experienced unimaginable suffering, and until their needs and their rights are fully recognized, peace will remain elusive. The international community has a moral responsibility to ensure that both sides are treated with the same dignity and that their concerns are addressed in a way that offers real, lasting solutions. This cannot be a peace built solely on one side's terms. True peace will require compromise, but more importantly, it will require mutual respect and understanding. It is critical to acknowledge that peace in Gaza is about far more than simply halting the violence. It is about dismantling the structures that perpetuate the conflict, both physical and psychological, the ongoing occupation, the blockade, the lack of freedom of movement, and the destruction of homes and infrastructure are daily reminders for Palestinians of their lack of sovereignty. For many, the idea of peace is inseparable from the need for justice. The absence of a Palestinian state, the absence of recognition of their rights and freedom, is at the core of the frustrations that drive the conflict. Without addressing these foundational issues, any peace deal will remain fragile at best and a mere illusion at worst. Similarly, Israel's security concerns cannot be ignored. For Israel, the spectre of attacks, both from Hamas and other militant groups, looms large, and the desire for security is deeply entrenched in the national psyche. The fear of another war, another wave of attacks, is something that shapes the policies of the Israeli government. However, security must be balanced with a genuine commitment to peace. It cannot be a justification for the continued suffering of the Palestinian people. The road to peace lies in finding a way to address both sides' fears and needs, ensuring that each side feels secure in their right to exist and thrive. Without security, peace cannot be sustained, but without justice, peace cannot be achieved. The international community, too, must step up its efforts. It is no longer enough to simply call for peace and hope for the best. The US, the European Union, and other international actors must play a more active and constructive role in bringing about a resolution. The history of international involvement in the Middle East has been one of mixed success. While there have been moments of genuine progress, there have also been moments where diplomatic efforts were undermined by external interests, by geopolitical power plays, and by a failure to hold both sides accountable. The world's major powers must come together, not just to call for a ceasefire, but to push for long-term structural changes that address the underlying causes of the conflict. They must be prepared to act as true neutral mediators, not as allies to one side or the other. Only then can they help create a space where both sides feel that their concerns are being addressed fairly. But beyond diplomacy, beyond political negotiations, there is also the need for a profound shift in how both Israelis and Palestinians view each other. This will take years, if not decades, to achieve. It will take the efforts of educators, activists, and leaders who are committed to fostering understanding and reconciliation. For too long, the people of Gaza and Israel have seen each other as enemies, as threats to their survival. This mindset has been perpetuated by propaganda, by violence, and by a lack of exposure to the humanity of the other side. If lasting peace is to be achieved, it must begin with individuals recognizing the shared humanity of the people on the other side of the conflict. It is not enough to say that peace is possible. We must create the conditions for peace to flourish in the hearts of those who have lived their lives in fear and hatred. This is where true change can begin, where the seeds of reconciliation can be planted. At the heart of this transformative process is the need for economic development, infrastructure rebuilding, and access to basic human needs. While political negotiations are essential, they must be paired with a commitment to rebuilding Gaza and creating opportunities for the Palestinian people. Without jobs, without access to education, Without the basic tools for building a better life, there will always be those who feel that violence is the only way to express their frustration. A peace built on empty promises and broken economies is no peace at all. The rebuilding of Gaza's infrastructure, the provision of essential services, and the creation of economic opportunities for its people must be integral to any peace deal. This is not just about physical reconstruction, but about giving people hope for the future, a future where they are not bound by the limitations of their past. For Israel, too, the need for economic stability is paramount. The ongoing conflict has placed a heavy burden on Israel's resources and its society. The constant security threats and the high cost of maintaining military operations are unsustainable in the long term. A lasting peace offers Israel the chance to focus on its future, to invest in the growth and well-being of its people, and to foster a sense of security that does not rely on constant military action. In the end, the pursuit of peace in Gaza cannot be a passive endeavour. It requires active participation from all sides: Israel, Palestine, the international community, and the people themselves. Peace will not be achieved through silence or through waiting. It will only be achieved through commitment, through cooperation, and through an unwavering belief that, despite the pain and the struggles of the past, a better future is possible. Peace will require sacrifices, yes, but it will also require vision, leadership, and above all, a recognition that the suffering of the people of Gaza and Israel must come to an end. For the sake of both peoples and for the sake of future generations, we must ask ourselves, how long can we wait before making peace not just a possibility, but a reality? As we bring this discussion to a close, it is clear that the road to lasting peace in Gaza remains fraught with challenges. The words of the US diplomat, while offering some hope, underscore the immense complexities that continue to hinder the realization of a true and enduring peace. Progress, as it has been described, is not enough. The ceasefires, the humanitarian aid, and the diplomatic talks are vital, but they are only temporary measures in a much larger struggle. The obstacles to peace are deeply rooted in the histories, fears, and aspirations of both the Israeli and Palestinian peoples. The mistrust, the security concerns, and the demands for justice are not issues that can be easily resolved by diplomatic negotiation alone. They require a fundamental transformation in how both sides view each other, how they acknowledge the deep scars of the past, and how they build a shared future. The international community's role is critical, but it is not enough to simply observe or call for peace. Real, lasting peace will require concrete actions, a commitment to justice, and a willingness to hold both sides accountable. It will take more than words. It will take consistent effort, sacrifice, and an unyielding commitment to addressing the root causes of the conflict. Ultimately, the question of where is lasting peace is not just about the cessation of violence. It is about a world where the dignity, security, and rights of every individual are respected. It is about building a future where no more families have to endure the suffering that has become all too familiar. It is a call for the international community to step up, for both Israelis and Palestinians to find common ground, and for each person who has been affected by this conflict to believe that peace is not just a dream, but a tangible possibility. Peace may seem elusive, but it is not impossible. The journey ahead will be long, and it will require the dedication and perseverance of leaders, diplomats, and citizens alike. But the question remains, how much longer can we wait before turning these words of progress into the reality of peace? It's time for us all to commit, not just to the negotiations that are happening today, but to the enduring work of making peace a reality for tomorrow.